My guest today is Matt Houston from Dallas. Matt is a prominent figure in Dallas, Texas, with expertise in business leadership, education, and community development. He's the CEO of Collaborative Culture LLC, a firm specializing in economic development, consulting, and bridging corporate community relations. Additionally, he serves as a professor of entrepreneurship and leadership at the University of North Texas at Dallas, where he also conducts research on social entrepreneurships and economic ecosystems. A native of Dallas's Oak Cliff area, Matt Houston is deeply committed to fostering economic equality through education and business creation. He has held various influential roles, including chair of the Economic Development Committee for the Dallas NAACP and vice chair of the African American Texas Association Chambers of Commerce. Houston has also been involved with organizations like the Dallas Black Chamber of Commerce and the Dallas City Planning Commission. Without further ado, let me get the main man in. Matt, how was that, sir?
Amazing. Great job. Thank you. And you're very gracious on that introduction.
Cool, cool, cool. Hey, Matt, thanks for humoring me on my hobby and my podcast. I just want to find out a little bit about you. So tell me about what what was it in your early days that made you want to be this guy in your community to uplift Oak Cliff and make it the best city that it could be?
It's funny, Roger. I just turned 41 last month. And so I really didn't spend a lot of time on thinking back on why I did a lot of things. I was just really active. I was very either trying to learn or was trying to just do and be. I just kept going. Um, I think the community facet molded me and propelled me into a direction uh, that they thought would be healthy for me. It starts with my mom and my dad. Um, my mom is an educator. She always taught. She was a career teacher. My father had multiple positions. He started in banking, so he really understood numbers. He understood the importance of business. He became an entrepreneur because he understood where he was placed and how being economically free, which path you should go, and then became an advocate for building systems of that path. And when he did that, starting in 1983, um, 41 years ago, I was in the thick of things. So I was a baby at his office, looking at community members of all colors, of all races, of all creeds, going into his office, talking about how to build the Dallas, the economic base, and how can the black community specifically, because we at the time served 25% of the population. So we had a significant stake in real estate, policy, and other assets that the city need in order to move forward. And my father was one of the directors over a key facet. And so learning through his lens how I can better society, I think shaped who I am today. I know that in this season, tribalism is divisive, can be divisive, and is definitely weaponized. But having that extra flavor, knowing where you come from, and kind of keeping your authenticity as you navigate in either the marketplace or in society in general, I think is what makes the world a funner, cooler place.
Is your job today, what you do 9 to 5, is it something that makes you happy and fulfills you?
Yes, because I'm an entrepreneur. So in my mind, and it supports and the lifestyle that I live, I am an entrepreneur who happens to teach entrepreneurship at the university level. So I have this intersectionality of the academy and the marketplace. And that's a sweet spot. One, because it blends literally my mom and my father's professions and their passions. and what I've observed. And two, when I do it, it's very easy. The tasks are hard, but me being inspired to do them and to accomplish them, I don't view them as work unless I'm grading papers. Grading papers is laborious, but other than that, um, no, I think that uh, carving out my space in the marketplace, particularly in an area of town where there's potential to benefit economically, and me having the knowledge to bring others with me. I think putting me in a place, an advantageous place.
How do you think opportunities within the Dallas Metroplex or in any inner city, what do you think governments could do better to actually get the youths to actually think more education and what they can do for their country rather than maybe sitting back and assuming they're a victim because they're told they're a victim all the time?
Great question, Roger. Um, I want to first state um, I want to clarify my position in this statement. I honestly don't think I don't want to put the government in full responsibility
Hmm.
in the actions of how in governance of youth, because I think youth don't trust most of society at this stage, including internal family structures, particularly those that aren't built on love and truth, right? And so, um, what I can say about government is that with it being the body that represents the people, quote unquote, the citizenry, it's very important that they are as efficient as possible. And efficient doesn't mean cut down. Efficient means being able to utilize and your utilization is benefiting the stakeholders or the shareholders, which are the community members, whether it's kids, knowing, assuring that we have programs in arts to make sure that they can cultivate their mind and can build creativity, or we have a place where 4, 5, 6, 7 year olds can imagine freely and be a kid in a park or an aquatic center. Those things government is responsible for in a specific area, not only to provide that setting, but also a means of transportation to get from their homestead to those places. If government can do that well, then a lot of other things can fall in place. You can have private entities, you can have nonprofits, you can have schools, you can have education systems kind of build on those types of foundational infrastructural things to build that kid or to build our society. I think that we haven't been efficient in terms of one, understanding everyone's role because it's been evolving. The infusion of technology in the last 25, 30 years um, has really disrupted government. Particularly, it's disrupted all markets, but government is typically something it has a lag and it typically has a long tail in terms of how it can change. And so
You know, when
that's
I
what
was
I have.
growing up in the um, early 80s, just leaving high school, there was lots of apprenticeships. There were
Hmm.
companies that were, the feeder system were the youth, So whether you wanted to get into plumbing, building, electric work, metal work, whatever it was, hospitals, nurse, there was a way you could have an apprenticeship. And in the
Right.
70s, that was it. I don't know if it was England, relatively socialist country. I don't know if that was what it's about. But when I look at a place like Oak Cliff, I kind of see two parts of Oak Cliff. there's an old Oak Cliff. There's an Oak Cliff that's been gentrified at the moment, and then there's an Oak Cliff that has kind of like social housing. And what I feel is that, and I'm glad I'm speaking to you because you can help me out here. I just
Mhm.
wonder if there is good opportunity for people in lower socioeconomic parts of the city to move up. And why I say that is sometimes you'll see these I was going to say Section 8, but
We'll say
subsidized
affordable housing, subsidized
affordable
housing.
housing, subsidized housing.
Mhm.
But the point is, where a great grandmother would live in it, and the daughter would inherit. A daughter would, great grandmother,
Mhm.
grandmother, mother, and the daughter, all living in this house, and it's passed on. And rather than us put ourselves or opportunities allow one part, someone in that chain to break out, it just seems like it's the norm. You know what I mean? And I just wonder what's happening in the fabric of our society that makes that happen at that end of the spectrum without not, I don't see a lot of change, the opportunity to get on that ladder. And these people just need an opportunity. So what do you think's happening there?
That is a very, very layered question, which I wish if you attend one of my lectures at UNT Dallas, I would love to have a breakdown on the impacts, the impact of your city and how it develops community, how it develops uh, systems of employment. You're absolutely right. There are systems, um, well, in terms of the apprenticeship programs. I can think of organizations like the Urban League, who typically in our society, or what I was raised up um, in which we are restarting the DFW Urban League in the near future. But there's a nonprofit organization that could take that role of what that apprenticeship type program. I remember when I was a member of the Young Professionals, I first discovered the rate of HVAC plumbers, the people who are in air conditioning and heating, all those types of workers were starting to sunset and retire. In 2007, there was a stat that was saying in the next 10, 15 years, that group will age out and there will be a void, right? Those spaces are centers of education so that we can try to educate our youth to get into those jobs. The programs are there. We as a society aren't directing or creating emphasis on those existing programs. Um, and it's all depending on this philosophy, this American philosophy of capitalism, and how that impacts um, individual cultures that are a part of it. I want to go into the Oak Cliff space because you brought up a really good observation that I'd like to also explain, and how understanding the two different parts of Oak Cliff, the historic part, and even the history of Oak Cliff, how the architects of the two developers of Oak Cliff, one of them was also the developer of Highland Park, which is the opposite of what Oak Cliff is perceived to be, right? And that has a history in itself. Um, and it's based on decisions that were made by developers and mindsets of government at the time, at the turn of the century, when you have a predominantly white male business oriented city structure, you have limited perspectives. You don't have perspectives of ethnic people of color. You don't have perspective of indigenous people that still existed somewhere in the proximity in the formation of Dallas. And so when Oak Cliff was annexed into the city, and this all became the same system based on a limited ideology or philosophy, um, that creates this distortion of how Oak Cliff becomes what it is today. An area of town that is 45% of the land mass, but only 15 to 16, 17% of the tax base, right? Those policies that were created in those times impacts people for generations. And we're seeing that. The thing that I am hopeful for, because you also asked if there are opportunities, is because of the existence of government and the existence of time and how you have places of common marketplace where you can discuss ideas, and then from those ideas, you change policy at City Hall. The opportunities are still there. We just have to understand where we are personally and how we want to move Dallas forward, or if we need to move North Texas forward as a unit, because the history of Dallas, the history of this region, initially was held on the shoulders of Dallas. But as time evolved, again, technology, infrastructure, um, the strength of this area being in the middle of the country and having tax ease of business being done in the state, uh, it provided opportunities for other cities, not only Fort Worth or Arlington, but also north of the city to benefit. And so, how do we move forward in the future? Do we move forward as a North Texas region? Because that's that's an important part. Because without Dallas, the other cities didn't exist. All of those are opportunities that people in Dallas, people in Oak Cliff can still contribute because everyone has provided these systems and has survived these spaces. UNT Dallas exists so that those scholars can provide that perspective and social economic or social entrepreneurial ecosystems, something that I study specifically because that's an ease of access for historically disenfranchised communities in an American capitalistic system.
Good answer. Good answer. So I live in the Metroplex as well, and obviously there are other cities that are doing that collect so much more taxes, and their high
Mm-hmm.
schools are so much more comprehensive. Maybe they can attract better teachers. So what's to stop certain people in certain socioeconomic brackets to not move around and actually share the spoils of some of these good schools so that you can be educated anywhere you want to be in within the metroplex?
Oh, I think something that is a factor. One, I can't speak for everyone. I think there are 12.5 million people in the Metroplex. I don't know the number now, but it's a large group of people who I have not met. But one thing I can say, based on my observation, is that people won't extend or stretch resources that they view scarce, right? Because everyone is entitled to their perspective, regardless of how they receive that information in current time. But people won't go above and beyond if they don't have, if they're comfortable, right? If people with means who have already created a system that provided a space where the people in their minds are all taken care of, that could be themselves. They can only care about themselves. And if they're good, everyone else, good luck, right? We're starting to cultivate a society of individualistic mindsets. And when that happens, we start having a larger philosophy of me, or as long as my small circle is good, I don't care about anyone else. That negatively impacts socialization or impacts how you build roads or highways because now you're altering thought patterns. You're causing people to no longer have a desire to use streets to attend a weekly game on a Friday and impact the different businesses from the home to that establishment, which can generate income. And I don't have that answer, but if people are frustrated and the people are being fed that we are in a panic time or that you should be threatened, and you look around and you're comfortable, you're not going to try to extend in faith in people who's supposed to be your enemy.
Right. So, so do you agree with me, or do you vehemently disagree that everything's not really about race? Then, I mean, it could have segregation could have started what we're seeing, with pockets of poor, disenfranchised, mixed around the city, especially in the southern part of most U.S. cities, you'd say. But then after a while, even though the legacies there, I mean, of the situation, yeah, segregation, whatever went on, but we're at a time now wherein people can freely move around. So I'll give you an example. I remember in
Hold on for
about,
one second, Roger. Hold
yeah,
on. You just made an assumption.
go
You
ahead.
made an assumption that people can freely move around.
Right. So I'm going to clarify that, and I want you to hold me on that. I want you to hold me on that.
Okay, cool, cool.
I enjoy this. I
And,
enjoy
and I'm
this.
only saying that now
Yeah.
because there is issues within our public transportation system in North Texas to prevent people to move publicly from one part of the region to the next because they feel they don't want they feel safe, they don't need transportation,
Right.
or they want to leverage something to withhold a group of people out of their communities.
Yeah. You don't
So,
make the train. You don't make the trains go too far north because you want to keep the undesirables out.
and that's funny. That's news to me because most people. I'm from the south. I've never really had a desire to take a train all the way north.
Right. 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 But if I remember rightly, I think in Atlanta that was an issue where a lot of the
The
north,
MARTA.
yeah, a lot of the very far north Atlanta cities,
Do,
you couldn't
yeah.
get you.
Do you know the history of the northern cities of Atlanta,
Oh,
Georgia?
I do. You know what? You're going to tell me about them, but around Kennesaw and places like that. But I bet you any
Okay.
money it's going to be like the Wild Wild West. But here's the example I
No,
was
no, hold
telling.
on, because I want us to go back to your question.
Yeah.
Because you asked me, do I agree with your position that race isn't the only issue or race is the sole issue? What is your position?
My I want to state categorically that
Mhm.
sometimes visually we see it as race, but sometimes it's purely socioeconomic. And not that race, the problem didn't start as a race in the beginning, but where we are now, we may be looking at it through a race lens, and maybe it's not there. Kind of like the 3 foot fence, wherein,
Gotcha.
yeah.
The equity
So,
deal.
yeah, wherein you train an animal. I think it's an elephant, and there was a little fence that an elephant, when it was small, it couldn't go over, and even when it got bigger and had the legs to go over, it wouldn't climb over it because it was
Mhm.
always there. I remember meeting a guy in about 1997, and I used to go to Oak Cliff with a friend of mine that I used to work with, and and coming from England, I wasn't used to being in the south part of a city or whatever. Our cities are a little bit different in England. And I met this guy, really bright guy. He went to Prairie View A&M, and
Panthers.
yep,
5 generations of Prairie View grads over here.
there you go.
And a
So
current niece for
ni-
OGPA.
nice. So this guy was, so I got introduced to this guy, and he was unemployed. He went to Prairie View, had an engineering degree, and I'm like, wow. And he couldn't find a job. And I'm like, man, I'm hiring. We got loads of jobs in telecoms. What do you mean? At the time, there was Nortel was doing well, Ericsson. And there was a mentality about just because of where he lived, he didn't realize that he needed to be maybe 15 miles north to where the opportunities were. Do you know what I mean? And when I say
Yeah,
the
so
opportunities,
exactly like the Ericsson's, TIs. along the Central Expressway corridor. If
Right.
you're living in Oak Cliff, why don't you live close to the area so that you can try to get a job that's close to your skill set?
Right, and move back if you need to. But my point was is that because there was nothing local to him after he came back from college, he's not looking out. He's playing video games in the day and talking to
Mm-hmm.
people that aren't. You know what I mean? But you
Yeah,
move north of 635, move a little bit far north, the people you meet are going to be a little bit more, there's much more engineers around there because there's much more engineering companies. And it's
gotcha.
amazing when you start rubbing shoulders and start fraternizing with different people, different opportunities come your way. And my point is, that's why, for me, we see race. It's important that we understand all the dynamics, but when you get fixated on it, it's the wood through the trees. You don't even realize that you're in a place where your light can't shine because it's not an engineering, haven, so to speak.
Got you. Thanks for clarifying that. And from your perspective, I definitely respect it. I disagree with it. And I think I can disagree because of the cultural differences we have. One, I don't think that you experience the generational trauma that American chattel slavery impacted our social economic space. Um, to answer your question, I don't believe it's everything is solely based on race. One, most fighters of racism don't believe that either. That's typically a narrative that people who are white or from a Euro standpoint project as what race is. And I discovered going to SMU, race is the work discussing race is I don't want to call it anything out of character, but it's like a scarlet letter or something that is not talked about freely in a population that I'm used to in Oak Cliff. I'm around black and brown people. We're talking about race all the time. We're talking inaccurately about race, but we're talking about race. And so to try to sum up in 2025 that that's the sole solution or that we can omit race in an American system, that American system is becoming the model of a global system, then I'll have to disagree. I do have another data point to support that because my brother is an engineer, was an engineer. He passed away in 2007. He graduated from Prairie View.
Sorry to hear, man.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. He graduated from Prairie View. He was an engineer, and he had a job at TI. He moved into an apartment off of LBJ. If you're not from Dallas, LBJ is essentially 25 miles from Oak Cliff, from where we grew up. So he moved in close proximity to his job. He lived there. He lived there until he got married and started raising his family. But he did not have this living in proximity did not impact positively or negatively that opportunity. Um, so I don't think that that can be a sole correlation. That could be a positive correlation, particularly of people who are of skill set, which Dallas attracts global talent of all races. So they don't carry the trauma of American racism. And which I think is important to acknowledge, particularly with the contributions that Black Americans and Americans who fought the civil rights have done. Because we're looking at 2025 today, they're essentially, the government is essentially repeating history. There have been multiple accounts of people trying to erase history, and it's specifically history of people who are not of Eurocentric mindset, who aligns with the American standard or the constitutional standard, and what it was designed and created for, um, or at least that portion of the Constitution. And so, by understanding the history of America, I have a different lens of understanding. You know what? I don't buy into the fact that we evolved because you all are still doing some ancestral stuff over there. So I need to refer to my ancestors to make sure I stay aligned with not repeating history. And the fact that I have to think that, and that I have a group of other people that think that are influential in this system, um, leads me to believe that we shouldn't go to that second evolved state quite yet. I would like to. I want to. I'm actively creating programs and participating in initiatives so that we can. But I can objectively say, based on laws that are existing, based on initiatives, the Plan 2025 year, Plan 2025 or whatnot, there's a document that stated exclusion of certain things. And it's not as accurate. It's not law, right? They're trying to make it law, which means there's some forces that's caused me to believe that we should not just say, you know what, forget race. So that's my long answer.
This is great. This is great. Do you think things are getting better?
I think things are progression. I think
Okay.
better or worse is relative.
But as humans, we spent a long time to to produce this gap. Don't you think naturally we will close the gap naturally? So as as time goes on, things get a little better. I think when we try to close that gap too quickly, it becomes unhealthy.
How so?
Well,
When you try to seek peace too quickly, or that's my interpretation of
no,
closing
no,
the
no,
gap.
no, yeah, and
Create
hey,
yeah, so I will catch myself
yeah,
on
yeah,
that. What's your definition of closing the gap? One.
closing the gap.
And
So
two,
say for
yeah.
example, so just the other day we were 3/5 of a man. I think what it was,
Right.
the
Hmm.
situation. But before that, the Moors were all in Europe. Africans were all in Europe.
Hmm.
Running things. That's before
Yep.
slavery, yeah. So there's these.
Well, it was before several things. It was before slavery. It was before the Enlightenment period too of your system, which is important to state because that's
Understood,
what
but
got them pissed off at Moors to
yeah,
start this slavery,
yeah. So
from
so
my perspective.
yeah, yeah. So these things happen, and I
Hmm.
think I'm a little bit different in I choose to think differently as well. And when I say I choose, I like to step back. I look at everything in science. I try not to get too emotional about things. So when I think of when I go for a job and I don't get the job, irrespective of what happened in that interview and how I felt going through that whole process, when Roger doesn't get the job, I never say, never do I say I didn't get it because of my race. Because for me, I think that's unhealthy, and that's something I never want to teach my child or wouldn't want us to keep on, you know.
Well,
It
you're
does
absolutely
happen.
right.
It does happen.
Hmm.
Don't you get me
Hmm.
wrong. I'm not
Right.
saying racism doesn't exist. I'm saying everything has to do with weighting. And I
Yes.
put a very small weighting on it. I look at life and I look at it's like cracks on a road, and I'm trying to step on secure paths to get to where I want to get to. I believe that if we keep on agreeing that we are victims, I think mentally it gives us a way out. And our evolution and strength is by finding a way, by fighting, by ignoring certain things, just to move
Hmm.
on. And I really
Yeah.
believe that. And I really think, and I've seen a lot of it, say, in certain third world countries where you have a political party and their whole purpose is to keep people uneducated and poor. And what they do, they just give you enough handouts, yeah? and the people
Hmm.
stay poor and unenlightened, and the politicians just run with the loot. So I say all that to say this. I hear the story about race, but I put a small weighting to it because I think it's unhealthy.
So I agree with you. The weight, I think that from your perspective, well, one, the coming together, the closing the gap, is that agreement or coming together or oneness? Is that closing the gap based on that description?
Yeah, closing the gap for me is, when color isn't an issue anymore. We're just dealing with
Got you.
people as a man. And to be honest with you,
That.
I have some really good white friends, good Indian friends, and sometimes when I want to generalize and I have these people in my life, it makes it very difficult for me. And that's why
Yeah,
I don't like the inverse being done. So I don't want
got
anyone
you.
to label me, and say you're like this, you're like that. But I want you to help me and answer this question. You
No, no, no.
use the
I
word.
want to answer this question, Roger. Hold on, hold on. I
All right,
like
all right, all
this
right, go ahead.
because I learned something and I reflected on my position on race, and I want to thank the broadly the Jamaican people, specifically my family and my exposure to a third being consistently in a non-American space that gives me a recalibration, if you will, on race, because I want to first acknowledge, yes, Black Americans have this view of race because we are suffering from trauma. The things that you stated was something that I'm learning, that I'm not I'm not worried that it exists. The issue is the weight that I have in my life. If I have the persecution of race or racism, systemic racism that's historically been done to me, if I weigh that heavily in my progress, in my being, then yes, that is paralyzing because you're looking at your past more than your future. What I don't want to be, what I see is misconstrued, is that white people or mainstream media is saying even talking about race will provide that type of stress. And for people who have been oppressed in America, that is inaccurate. We're not stressed when we talk about race. We're stressed when racism is acted on us, and it's acted in ways that is not the same as you're not going to get hired because you're black, because that is now archaic. That is outdated. You can't say that. HR taught them that in the 60s, right? But but as everything evolves, um, especially if the people who perpetrated that system does not correct it, acknowledge or correct it, which there's proof Americans are not doing that. I don't have a belief to change my thesis that race is a key issue in a lot of things. Now, with that being said, that's trauma that I face. And I didn't learn that until I stepped away and learned the oneness philosophy of Jamaica, right? Y'all have out of many one people. Is that you all's? I
Motto.
don't want to miss right.
That's the motto.
Motto. And so my brother-in-law Rich taught me that, and it's taken me 5 or 6 years just to see how racism in America can negatively impact your human view of things. One, in our capitalistic society, America's the epicenter. The US dollar is dominant. And we are also the epicenter for technology, pop culture, education. All of that's changing now, which is causing this rift, if you will. That's another discussion for another podcast. But acknowledging that America is the center of all of these things, and me being a minority portion of that, when I look back and go to a third world country on a mission trip to Mexico, or if I go to South America, I realized my downfalls are absolutely nothing, right? And then you learn perspective. But that's healing that needs to be done. That's something that people have done individually. That's something that Martin Luther King have tried to teach people to do in the 60s. And by the way, studying Marcus Garvey and having his retreats of his leadership group in Jamaica so that he could create these things. But you know what happened? The establishment shot him. And so those types of systemic things cannot cannot be ignored if they haven't been if they have not been addressed. And I feel that they haven't.
Okay, so very interesting, very interesting. As I said, I'm that guy. I hate. I don't want to go with the go along, get along. That's not me.
Yeah, I got you. No, no, I
I
got you.
I want to be that guy that's standing outside
Well,
and
you're an
say,
agitator, Roger. But I mean, I'm a diplomat, brother. Shoot,
okay,
I give you what I can.
all right. So, are you? Do you realize that what black people went through in the United States of America and for so long, and how long it went on? Do you appreciate that to other races and to white people, they don't care?
No, I appreciate all people's struggles. To answer your
Okay,
question.
okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes,
What I hear is black people, don't you? Why don't you care about my struggle? And I'll answer that for you. Because America has made black people the most exploited group of people in the world. Because America created television broadcast and they made black Americans look like a certain thing from whenever motion pictures or entertainment in America was done, that was rapidly transferred across the world to create this caricature of us. So before you move forward, I understand other people's struggles, but I also understand that when the reason why I stand in this position is because the largest platform made my struggle truth to everyone else. And regardless of what you want, what I can be, regardless of how smart I am, regardless of how smart you are, Roger, there are still some things, some conversations you have to do to dispel a couple of things because of your color. But then once I start talking and I have this American accent, again, me going to Europe with my white friend who was and I call him my white friend because he's my friend who happens to be white. He was my roommate at SMU. He exposed me and took me to Switzerland for 10 days. That changed my life. That showed how much trauma I had as a black American. Those type of things, I think, are some ways that black Americans cannot be so proud to beat the chest so that other people can feel intimidated and people view that we don't care about other people's struggles.
I would never say I have trauma.
I'm going through something now, and I've read enough history books in America to tell me that Black Americans have had trauma, and I just realized it like last year
So
because I
do you
think
think Black American trauma? Explain to me how Black American trauma differs from Afro Caribbean, Afro Brazilian trauma, different from um, colonialism in Africa and the trauma people in African countries, minus Ethiopia, went through.
the flavor of the European. My issue is I haven't had enough energy to understand other people's trauma because that's toxic. Now, what I'd like to do is, I mean, no, nobody, if you're on vacation, I don't want to take my worries on vacation. Most people see Americans on vacation. on social media or things. Black people, if you want to have substantive talk about race, right? We're not in a space to do it. What I will make accountable to my people, Black Americans, descendants of slaves, is to tighten up. Kendrick Lamar and Samuel L. Jackson told us that in the Super Bowl party. I mean, at the Super Bowl halftime show. We are a show, regardless of if we like it or not. We have to tighten up because everyone's watching. And when we are exposed, when we give something that the people won't see or people won't want to hear, that will have adverse effects. Now, I personally don't speak for every Black American. I also recognize I'm an outlier, but I'm also placed in a position of leadership. So my outliership is a space for me to at least impact someone. They want me to be on the platform to inspire someone. And so me making sure that I'm the best me I can be, the best human I can be, because my parents never taught me to be the best Black person. My parents taught me to be the best person, kick everyone's butt, and then give back to your community so that we can all get a fair shake. That's all I want to teach people. And if that word, if that intention is cut off through censorship, which some countries and some cultures experience, for example, I'm learning now that jujitsu and Afro Brazilians is the key communicator of how they kept their culture, ancestral culture in the motherland. And it wasn't through language, it was through martial arts. That blew my mind. I didn't have time to, I would love to learn about that, but you know what our country is doing? Stop educating people about American slavery. Is that an issue, Roger? I think it is.
You know, in the 70s, when we wanted to know anything, we would get an encyclopedia out and we'd get as much information as we could. But with social media and stuff now, there's a lot of information going around.
I
So,
love how
so
you said that. Information. Garbage in, garbage out, my brother.
it's information. It's information. We don't know
That's very
what.
diplomatic of you,
Yeah,
Roger.
we don't know what we've heard. But I'm enjoying this. I've got a
Okay.
question to ask you, Matt.
Yeah.
So imagine politics as in two pills: a red pill and a blue pill.
Okay.
You have to vote one way or another. Do you think certain people, by virtue of their pigmentation, should vote a certain way in an election just because they share a skin tone? Or the question I'm really asking, are we that monolithic that everybody should take the same color pill in an election when there's only two parties?
So I'll answer your question and then I'll give you my thoughts. No, we should not be monolithic. I don't believe that that should happen. One, but my thought is because you use red pill and blue pill, I know for the Matrix, but in the American system, you can literally choose and write whoever you want. The problem is you're not going to win. And America loves winners. So no one's going to stick out and right hand someone. We have peer pressure to choose these two groups, which makes it feel like high school, which is frustrating because in our current environment, society, we can't operate on a high school diploma anymore. Like the global, literally the global economy is at graduate level stuff. And so we have to have a political system that has the intricacies so that an African American who's a farmer in rural Texas can honestly follow their conservative values while still having a social progressive agenda or a social progressive position, or not be vilified in the marketplace by not being Republican because the only way they can make money or have their family live is if they have to vote for white people, vote with white people. I want to live in a world
But
where
when you said
that
vote,
doesn't
when
okay.
you said vote with white people, does that mean that all white people vote a certain way in your estimation?
No, that was in my explanation of rural Texas,
Okay, okay.
which historically rural Texas is red. In fact, every county in Texas is red except for the urban counties, which are blue. So that's why I use that example.
And why do you think that is?
Well, I can give you the history of Texas, but it's not really important until 1940 or so when the oil boom happens. And now Texas is collided as being the number one producer of a resource that the globe needs. And in America, using politics and rules to create an industry, to be able to create systems, sometimes socially, have negative things happen. But long short, it stemmed in capitalism and the opportunity to capture, particularly in 1940, when white men in the government, pre-civil rights, dominated a space that started regulation and has created that system, and we haven't changed it since. So there's no reasonable projection to say otherwise.
Okay. Um, so a couple of things I learned today, um, good, bad, and indifferent. So
Mhm.
I didn't when I look at the word trauma, as I said, I feel that it's not something I want to say. It's like telling myself I'm stressed. I think what it does for some people, it just makes you more and more stressed. Um, when when I when you say black people have gone through trauma, do you say now that you're going through trauma, and then would you say your kids are going through trauma, and their kids will go through trauma? When does it stop? When do we say, okay, the past is a past. I've divorced that past, and I'm going to, you know, some of us got 30 years in front of us, some of us got 40 years in front of us. Let me just make those the best 40 years. When can we move on?
Well, I know for a fact my kids have no trauma socially at this stage. They're 1 and 3 years old, right? And so they're not, and they're still at home. They're not, they haven't been socialized in school yet. They've only been socialized in public spaces, church spaces where they haven't created a social construct or some type of tribal identity, whether it is in school, whether it's a geographic location, whether it's a sport. So they're not impacted by this trauma yet because they haven't understood that concept. Me, the parents of that group, um, see, because I've read history, I kind of see trauma in my windshield, windshield, and I'm trying to navigate all the pitfalls so that I won't be overwhelmed or I won't be succumbed to it. That's probably a bad analogy. Sometimes I miss and I get some trauma on my shoulder and I feel that, but I can't let it overtake me. I recognize it's there. I don't ignore it. I don't try to re-diagnose it. But because we have facts and there's facts supported by policies so that you can prevent that to happen again, I must acknowledge that. But I cannot overtake it. The people who are older than me, the older I get, I realized 40 years old was the time I started not really being as comfortable. I don't want to say not as optimistic. At 40, I felt more comfortable about myself than I ever had. And that's because I started understanding the tests and trials that I went through and I survived gave me a realization or some evolved thought that I don't have to prove anyone to anyone. I don't prove anyone to anything to anyone. And so um, as that journey happens, um, I kind of see it, but other people don't. And societally, to be honest with you, as a group of people, we don't have the education or the holistic, the macro coping mechanism to heal to of our past heals. Women have trauma because there were literal mating and they were mating people for profit. That impacts families. That impacts how people view a family unit. That happens over generations. And there has not been a solution to either address it or to correct it. So we have to live with that. And
By
our
whom?
societal solution
Who
is
do you?
individualistic. Our society in America, in a capitalistic space, we don't socialize medicine. We don't socialize health. So we have to rely on our individual resources to provide that help. That have positive and negative um, consequences. In America, if I'm paid or if I in a certain social economic bracket, I can look for the best psychotherapist in African American trauma because I have the education to know to look at that for that particular therapist because that's a specialization that requires more money than just Joe Blow on the corner or someone that's online. And so, but that takes me having access to that social economic construct in America to be able to do that. And all of us don't have that, and I don't have the best. I have like the mid version. Like I like this good, solid sedan version of my life, right? But other people are much less fortunate than I am, who have less resources, who aren't able to be able to healthily take care of that individually. So they have to succumb to groupthink, group economics. And if you're in a space where you don't have any positive things or there are no positive services that can provide that type of influence, then that's the downward spiral. And so, with me being a leader, individually, I think of excellence, but I also, as a leader, think of how can I educate others so that they can be enlightened because I have to tweak it because of my relationships with them.
Powerful, very very powerful. I wonder how you stay so hopeful, even knowing that you self-identify as someone that has trauma.
Spirit, yes, yes. I also fundamentally believe that tests are exist and they're intentional and that I can overcome them if I'm able to focus on myself, focus on the God around me, focus on what guides my life. For me, that's my walk in Christ, my family, whom put as like the core in my life, and um, just have to have faith. Like that's the whole lesson of faith in every religion, right? In order for you to have hope, you have to have faith in something.
So religion is pretty high in your moral compass and how you move around life.
Spirituality is very, very high.
Okay.
Religion
Oh,
itself, I'm discussing. Christianity, yes. The structure, I'm not because I was raised Protestant. I naturally have an adversarial view of Christianity structures. But the more that I'm learning the other structures and how it's tied to colonialism, imperialism, all those types of isms that have caused negative impacts of my culture, um, I am sifting away spiritual from religion.
nice, nice. You know, I lump them all in one box. You know me, so it is what it is.
That's real.
So,
No, that's real.
do you want to be buried or cremated?
I don't know.
You don't care.
No, I really don't care.
And when we expire, what do you think happens to us?
I personally believe my spirit transitions, go to an ancestral place, heaven, in my belief. I feel that science has proven that we recycle. Our bodies are made of organic matter. that is set to recycle. And if you read religious text or you really read your thing that you look at spiritually, the common theme, the cycle, um, this infinite cycle is kind of a thing that you kind of come across at some point. And I feel that our flesh, it's not worth much anyway. And so I think it's what you do with it. And if you have a flesh to reinvest in the ground, typically, if that ground is, if it was healthy, it was something good for that ground, it will blossom something better. And that's what I hope to do.
Matt, when you've been at your lowest, that you remember, lowest, as far as something's happened in your life, grief or
Mhm.
whatever, how did you grab yourself, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and move on?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think of the healthy things I've done because in multiple low points, I didn't treat them the best. Um, I did not seek help, and help is just communicating with people. But I'm learning. I learned of the things that get me out of dark places, and that's when I start talking to people. And as I progress, and I have a checkpoint, and I turn around, and I realize that's the lowest I've been in 5, 10 years. I was just trying to fight and try to survive because that's kind of my mentality. Um, but I realize you have to reach out, and reaching out can be your friend, a buddy that you play golf with, that you can say 10 words to, but you all are focused on the golf game, but you all are in sync. Or it can be talking to a cousin that you rarely talk to, but you all grew up with one another and you have common family bonds that can kind of snap you into a space that can give you strength to press forward. It's just finding those common things, and communicating and reaching out to, to ask for help.
No, that's powerful. That's powerful. You know, for myself, I would. What surprised me is that the obvious people, some of the people that are nearest and dearest to you that you love, sometimes by confiding in them, you may drag them down, and your love for them is so much that not telling them is you trying to protect them, but not realizing that you've done the opposite because they feel betrayed and they may have been able to help, or they could see what you're going through and realize why. Do you know what I mean?
You're
So
speaking a word, Roger. You're
yeah,
speaking a word,
it's just
and
a
this is
wonderful
how I
thing.
know you have a great woman next to you, and Angela, because you're absolutely right.
Hey! I could have been in transition. Luckily, luckily you're right.
No, 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 no. I know your people, Roger.
That's nice. That's nice. That's nice.
No, it's
Yeah,
all
yeah,
good.
yeah.
But no, you're hitting the nail on the head, and I'm learning that now, right? Full disclosure, I started this mental health journey two years ago, and it started from a potential work opportunity. Someone who was a national speaker on mental health, African American, former athlete, was launching his national tour, and he wanted to have a Dallas location. And I was connecting with his team to be a part of this tour because I'm in this league, I'm in this group of black leaders across the country that's trying to build our community. And I listened to one video of his and realized I wasn't in the mental capacity to effectively do what he needs in Dallas. And that shook me. Talking about low places, someone who is very confident and someone who is the man in the know in the city, um, had to sit on the sideline for something that is out of his control. Um, that kind of drove me um, down a spiral, and I had to seek help. Right, and help isn't. I initially I thought it was laying on the couch, looking at the ceiling, talking to someone who you don't care about, all your personal secrets. But there are multiple versions of this, and I just want you just need to demystify. I say all of that to say those are the types of things that help me be me today, and I just want to share that with people. And so
I choose friends of mine that are people that will say, "Raj, you bullshitting," or my wife will
yeah.
say, "Roger, make it a lie." I like people that I like that. If you're gonna be constantly boosting me up when I'm full of shit, it doesn't work for me.
What? Well, that's true. Don't be full
Yeah.
of shit, then, Rob.
Yeah, I know. There you
That's a
go.
self
So
discipline.
so so I pick people that will that hold you to account. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
uh,
And there's a time and place for everything because you're absolutely right. Um, you don't need to be, and I try to tell people, I'm always optimistic. I'm the optimistic guy. And so what I have to do, I have to have a discipline to stem all of my feelings or projections in truth. I have to tether myself because if you have an optimistic guy who's always spreading sunshine and all that, you seem like a cheesy salesman or you selling something, some type of which I don't know what you call it, right? But it's really important to have a balance. One, two, to have something that is hardcore, that's common, that you can tether on, that other people can identify, right? I'm not everybody's cup of tea, right? I recognize that. But if I'm going to try to be everyone's cup of tea, if I'm going to appease everyone, I'm not going to be happy. And so you have to find that balance. And once I turned 40, I realized, oh, this is my lane. I'm in Dallas. There's an opportunity for this lane. And I can influence people because of my experiences that possibly can learn something of all races. Why don't I uh, bring that to the table, show it to everyone, and then see where it falls? Now, if we live in that world and everyone can do that, I promise you we'll be better. And
okay,
that's another optimistic point from Matt Houston.
Matt. This has been really good. I've got one more question for you, Matt. Why is
Yes,
it
sir.
that I can just speak to you and know how you voted? Why is that?
Because I'm transparent.
But 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 but
Because I also didn't sell you either.
no. But
You
my point is, how comes I can just have a conversation with you? We haven't spoken about where you marked your X, but I can tell. Why?
asked great questions. And again,
So you
great
do agree
questions.
that you have a leaning then? Your character
I never
leans.
you So I would openly tell you who I voted for. You never asked me that. You
No,
asked
no,
a
no,
lot
no,
of
no. I,
theoretical
I, I,
questions.
I wouldn't have to ask because guess what? It is so obvious. But that's my point.
But but
How
but but
comes?
but this is what I'm telling you. I don't live in a world where politics is not, I don't want to say secret. In my social construct as a black man in America, I don't have to live with the weight of someone's First Amendment rights being discovered because everyone knows where I vote. Because there was historical precedent that said, or that provided either benefits or progress to people whom I care about. They changed once or twice throughout the 270 plus year history of America. And I also don't think it's the right uh, system. That's why I brought up the whole third party space. But I also like to win. Unfortunately, I lost.
Hey, I'm not making any assumptions, but I'll ask you this question. And that question it made me think of this one. Why do you think so many black men didn't vote the way you did and where popular people thought they would vote? Why did black men, Latin men, kind of turned their back on Old Faithful? What was it about Old
Gotcha.
Faithful?
Two things. Two things. One, there's a media ploy because there's stats. Black men only waver to 90%. We didn't waver like brown men, which that was the narrative pre-election, pre-November, and then post-election, things got quiet. When the numbers came out, they stopped bashing black men and putting that on the record. With that being said, I do and I did hear disturbing philosophies and reasons. One, because Kamala, some of them still don't know how to spell their name, pronounce her name. That was problematic. They didn't care to learn how to say her name. And as a man, if you don't care to learn someone's name, you automatically know you don't respect them in any role of leadership. So I knew she was doomed from those folks in the first place. Secondly, there's this our society, especially in the South. I can at least talk about black men in the South in this Christian religious type of positioning that was supposed to be a conflict between men and the body. Um, that was absurd to me because Donald Trump doesn't even know books of the Bible, and so for our president now, because he was able to gain uh, a group of people who historically have spiritual principles of love, but in politics, because of either gender or because of the status quo, uh, convince people in their flock or people in their realm that Kamala Harris was not the right president or was not a leader, also was a factor. And that was disturbing. And that happened to individuals who were older than me for the most part. There were still some, they have other issues that are either my age or younger. But the men who are 50 and older, I saw that from my small group of people that I noticed. But that was troubling.
Okay. Cool, cool, cool. Hey, I've enjoyed this a lot. We've been over an hour 12, and I don't want people to get bored
Oh,
with
okay,
this. But
cool.
guess what?
Cool conversation.
We're gonna have to talk a little bit more because now that I know you dare to go down that road with me with politics, I have so many questions, so many questions. I need more agitation. So
Yeah,
I'm
well,
gonna make
rightfully
sure.
so.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right. So it's really interesting. I would love to connect with you. To let me know I'm here.
Yes, man. Yes, man. Anyway, thank you very much, sir. This
I
has been a
appreciate you,
pleasure.
brother.
Yeah, man. Respect.
Thanks. You have a good one.
All
Peace.
right. All right. That was great, Matt. I didn't know you were so argumentative. It makes it even better. I mean, that was nice. That was nice. Hey, I'm gonna send you something probably later on tomorrow night.
Okay.
Yeah, because I get